All right, hello everybody. This is Raul Abbott on behalf of the VTA and the Minority Business Consortium and SVTC, the Silicon Valley Transit Consultants. We welcome you to this month's BART Silicon Valley Phase 2 Mentor Protege Workshop. Again, I'm Raul Abbott. I'm Vice President with WSP, and I'm SVTC's Mentor Protege Plan Lead. I'm joined today by MBC representatives Reginald Swilley and Carol Bean. Today's presentation is the 6th workshop and covers the topic of how smaller firms integrate with mega projects. Please note today's presentation is being recorded and a copy will be made available to the public following today's workshop. Remember, the presentation is being recorded. As I mentioned earlier, we won't take time to do formal introductions of all the attendees, but ask that you use the chat function to announce yourselves, include your contact information and name of business. And also a reminder to put yourself on mute if you haven't already done that. I don't think you have to, but if the option's available, mute yourself. The presentation is expected to run 30 to 35 minutes, allowing time for Q&A. However, our presenter is comfortable with you using the Q&A function to ask questions. He'll stop to address them or raise your hand if you feel the need to ask a question, and he'll address them as we go along. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Reginald Swilley from NBC to say a few words. Reggie?
Yes, thank you, Raul. To everybody that's present, we are hoping that these Mentor Protege workshop series is really answering many of the questions and some of the concerns that you have. VTA and Minority Business Consortium and the whole project is very glad to be offering this. We are in the process of trying to make sure that all of your major concerns are addressed in these programs. You can send us information about what you would like to for us to talk about. Luster International is presenting again today. Their last one was very well received, and we're expecting that again today. Luster Nationals, I'm sorry. Anyway, we're glad to have you here, and if you have any issues that you want of concern around the Mentor Protege program, reach out to us and we will do our best to respond. We were expecting another good presentation today. Thank you, Raul.
Thank you, Reggie. So now on with today's workshop. Today's presenter is Jeff Conrad from Luster National. Jeff has worked in the transportation construction industry for over 23 years and has become passionate about bringing, quote, right brain thinking to left brain industry. I resemble that remark, Jeff. His presentation will share lessons learned from a Georgia-based mega program and will speak to opportunities from smaller firms to integrate/partner with larger firms and clients. Well studied in team development and emotional intelligence, Jeff is focused on helping great engineers become great leaders of other people. With that, I'll turn it over to Jeff. Thanks, Jeff.
Great. Thank you so much, Raul. Just prior to the session starting, I don't want to pull the curtain back too far, but we were talking about some of the upcoming workshops that you all are going to be having, some of the topics that are slated for future discussion. And what an exciting opportunity today to speak with everybody. I hope I can live up to the expectations of the upcoming sessions. They sound like they're going to be really good. I wanted to take a little bit of time today and just, as Raul said, just open up the conversation. I welcome, I've got my chat box open. So if you want to use the chat to ask questions while I'm going through this, I'll keep an eye on that. Raul will also watch the Q&A and the chat. So if you'd like to ask questions in that way, I'm certainly open to that. I'll pause when appropriate. And then certainly we can take questions and answers at the end. I've got plenty of time to do that. So look forward to any questions that might come up. As Raul said, I'm what they call the professional development manager. I have a 20-year background with the Georgia Department of Transportation. Most of my time there was spent in organizational development and leadership and management development. And I left there as the director of training and development for the organization and had the wonderful opportunity to come on board with Luster National and work with HNTB on a mega program. And so I thought what we might do today is spend a little bit of time talking about some lessons learned that we've seen here on the East Coast in a huge program. And I'll give you a little bit of a rundown as to what we're doing out here. But we have a huge program and how smaller firms can build organizational alliances personal alliances within these huge mega projects and mega programs, and talk a little bit about why that's important, why we should even be focused on these allegiances and alliances. And then I really wanted to spend the first part of the presentation talking at a high level, introducing you to who we are in the MMIP and what we're doing out here. And the conversation will shift to some more direct how-to kinds of things for you at the end. So anytime I do a presentation like this, I like to leave the session with some tips and some skills that you might develop that might help you along the way. So hopefully that sounds like that content will be edifying for you. I'm certainly excited to present it. You'll probably hear me use the word complexity about 115 times in 35 minutes. So, but I really want to express that. I know that the program that you all are working out on the West Coast is very complex. And I know that our program here is also extremely complex. So where I thought we might start our journey today is to just take a look at our organization, and hopefully you'll get a sense for, when I say complexity, what I'm talking about. So of course, our client is the Georgia Department of Transportation. They have been doing work in alternative delivery and in the traditional design bid build world for a long time. It's staffed with excellent, outstanding people. And ultimately, we started a program called the Major Mobility Investment Program, the MMIP. It is an $11 billion program with a large portfolio of different projects. And so what you see here is we have, of course, general engineering consultants, and then the PMC, which is the program management consultant, is HNTB. And so attached to Luster through HNTB, this is where I sit in terms of the program. And then you can also see that we have a portfolio of projects down at this level. These are everything from widening projects to interchange reconstruction projects. We have lots of express lane projects as well, which are relatively new to the state of Georgia. So already you can start to see we have a lot of personalities at the table. Each one of these projects, of course, has PMC and HNTB as the PMC. Each program has a different GEC. So you can see these are large players in the industry: Parsons, WSP, Jacobs, AECOM, Atkins, Arcadis, RS&H. Each one attached to different projects. And then, of course, underneath that, there are then the developer teams. And our projects, we have several that are in post-let, i.e. they're in construction. And then we have several more that are still in pre-let, in the engineering phase, and several that are in procurement right now. So as you can imagine, there are a lot of personalities at the table. And then tucked into this whole thing, we have 22 DBE firms that are working in just the PMC alone, and 82 different DBE firms that are working across the spectrum of our project portfolio. So a lot of different personalities at the table, a lot of different perspectives, different ways of looking at things, different ways of looking at motivators. A lot of small firms, and then a lot of really, really big firms. So we'll spend a good bit of time talking today about how the small firm can stand out and how the small firm can help these bigger firms take these very complex projects to the next level. So that being said, why don't we start off with a definition of what is a mega project. Now you'll hear me kind of use interchangeably mega program and mega project. But according to the very fancy Oxford Handbook of Mega Project Management, a mega project is a large-scale, complex venture. Typically, they cost more than $1 billion. They take many years to develop and build. And here's probably the most important part. They involve multiple public and private stakeholders. They are transformational and impact millions of people. So certainly the projects that you all are executing out there in California fall under this definition. Ours does as well. So we are indeed taking part in a complex mega project or a mega program. All of those multiple public and private stakeholders are, again, what make this a very complex operation to pull off. And anytime we talk about complexity, what we're essentially talking about is chaos. And we often joke on our program that we operate with one toe just over the line in chaos, but we're that close. Projects change, scopes can change, public opinion changes. All of these impacts can have a big effect on our projects. So very early on, and I wanted to share with you several of these real foundational documents that we came up with on our program that have been extremely successful and really served as compass headings for us. Very early on, our client actually brought this first one to us, and it's a great article that was found in the Harvard Business Review. And it's the title of the article, and we can make these available. Raul, maybe at the end I'll send you some links and we can distribute them if anybody's interested. But this was a fantastic article, again, in the Harvard Business Review. And we use a lot of these articles as foundational documents so that it's not just Jeff Conrad standing up talking about these soft skills in front of engineering firms, but we actually have some really strong organizations that are backing up and giving us our data. So very early on, our client brought this one to us. And the great point about, one of the major points about this article is that the authors posit that this notion of chaos pilots are extremely critical for the execution of mega projects. Chaos pilots are people who can creatively lead a project through uncertainty. And I think if you've been working on this project for any length of time, you'll know that there can be uncertainty out there in our industry. So certainly being a chaos pilot is being able to lead through that. They have the ability to create structure within chaos and to take action, but they ultimately have the ability to drive forward on a project even while the environment around them fluctuates. And that's absolutely critical. So we have to have, all of these mega programs have to have an army of chaos pilots behind them that are able to drive these projects through, even in uncertainty. And so the small firms definitely have a place for that, definitely a role in being a chaos pilot for these large organizations. So towards the end of the presentation, I'll talk to you a little bit about how to become a chaos pilot as a small firm. Probably one of the biggest, most foundational documents that we use is this one called the NASA's Journey to Project Management Excellence. And I'll just spend a little bit of time describing what this white paper outlines and why we find it very foundational. This was a study that was actually commissioned after the 1986 Challenger disaster. And just in case you may not remember what happened back in 1986, the Challenger was a space shuttle, so it was one of the first aircraft, I'm sure you've seen them, but it was designed to go into orbit and then actually be flown back to Earth, kind of revolutionary back in the late 70s and early 80s. And the shuttle looked kind of like a plane a little bit and had these solid rocket boosters that were just basically filled with fuel that sat on the side. Ultimately what happened, this particular mission, of the Challenger spacecraft, was a very, very high priority, or high profile, I should say, launch, in that we had our first civilian school teacher was on this mission. And so she had been selected from across the country. They did a lot of work in selecting her, and she was going to be the first teacher that went into space and taught from space. And so for NASA, this was a very, very high profile launch. Unfortunately, the Challenger ran into some challenges in its launch window, and there were basically some weather delays that caused some issues. And to make a long story somewhat shorter, the spacecraft sat in its vertical position, so ready to launch, up and down, squared away. It sat on the launch pad for several extended days because of the weather conditions. And then to make matters even worse, Florida had a very bizarre cold snap that happened. So the spacecraft sat in a vertical position and its O-rings on these rocket boosters were compressed in under 40-degree weather for a sustained amount of time, and therein lies the challenge. Now, a small group of engineers, actually with Thiokol rocket systems, actually raised their hand and said, NASA, we're not sure if we should go forward with this launch. We've never tested the seals on the solid rocket boosters sitting in temperatures below 40. Who would have needed to? We were in Florida. It didn't even seem practical, I suppose. And they raised their hand and they said, we're suggesting no go on the launch. So a small group of engineers, a small voice inside a mega program, and all NASA projects are mega programs, right? Launching a shuttle is a mega program. Small group of engineers said no go. Ultimately, NASA came back and said, do you really want to say that you're not ready to launch? The profile was high, the window was closing, they needed to launch. And ultimately the decision was made, the engineers backed down, and the decision was made to launch the aircraft. And unfortunately, the disaster happened where shortly after takeoff, the rockets did not seal properly, the fuel was leaked, and there was an ignition, killing all hands on board and losing the spacecraft. It's a horrible, horrible day for NASA. This paper, all that to say, this paper is an analysis of what happened in the mega program that caused it to fail. And so the General Accounting Office at the federal level was the office that was commissioned to do the study. And basically a quote from this paper, and it's a great paper to read, is what do GAOs, General Accounting Offices, high-level conclusions based on 2 decades of research and analysis tell us about the nature of mega project failure. In other words, what is going to cause a project or a program like yours or like mine to fail? Where is the pinch point? And ultimately, what NASA discovered was, simply put, project failure is a people problem. And I just want to sit on that for just a second, because I just really want everybody on the call to think about the gravity of that particular quote. Here we had a small group of engineers who were vocal, and they raised their hand and they said, we have a concern, and they launched anyway. And ultimately the GAO says project failure, mega project failure, is a people problem. So we have to focus somewhat on the people side of our industry. And that includes our small firms as well. So on our program, we came up with a little saying about 3 years ago. We said the hard stuff is easy, it's the soft stuff that's difficult. And what do we mean by that? Well, you'll notice I put easy in quotes. The hard stuff is not necessarily easy, but it's very predictable. It's the things that we go to school for. It's the things that every one of the firms that are on the call right now are really, really good at doing. So it's all the professional services, it's the accounting, the estimating, the environmental documents, the engineering, the planning, the scheduling, all of that stuff are the hard skills that we bring to the table. And that stuff is actually pretty easy. What will get us is the soft stuff, and that's what's difficult. All of the relationships that we have, what allows a small firm to have a voice at the table that says there's something wrong here and we need to do something about it. And so shifting slightly here, we'll shift gears slightly and start talking about how we can come to the table, some tips, some things that we've learned that really allow us to work together and really allow our voices to be heard. So I wanted to talk a little bit about developing alliances, especially from the perspective of a small firm. One of the things I think that small firms can really bring to the table are their best practices. So in other words, you are, as a small firm, as a DBE firm or another player in the game, you are your expert at what you do. And so always be ready to bring your best practices to the table. Certainly when you're working with a large firm, sometimes that can be somewhat intimidating, and you can kind of go in with that attitude of, well, I'm just a sub-consultant here to perform a service. But ultimately, the large firms are hiring you because you bring to the table best practices, and they want those best practices put on the table. So always remember that you're the expert in the room, and that you need to bring those best practices. Now, here in our program, we really take this seriously. So anytime there's any kind of an incident, good or bad, we do what we call after action reports, where we'll actually sit down and do an analysis of what went well, maybe what didn't go so well. And then we've developed an extensive library of lessons learned so that as our projects are coming online, we're learning those little lessons each time and getting better and better and better. And our small firms play a critical role in that process because they bring to the table a lot of the expertise that allow them to speak out. Another tip in developing your organizational alliances is to remember your brand. And this is something that I really think if you are on the call and you are an owner of a small firm or a CEO of a small firm, I think that this is a really good conversation to have with your team members who are embedding with these large organizations. And that is to remember the brand that you bring to the table. Certainly there's a game that you have to play in our industry where as a sub-consultant, you integrate, of course, with the larger firms. That's what this presentation is all about. But never forget who and what you are and never forget your brand. And if I were owning a company that were in that space, I would make sure that my participants on the program understood what the brand is and what we're all about. I'm not a huge sales guy, but I do understand that one of the things that small firms bring to the table is they've got their ear to the ground. They're integral parts of the organization and they can listen for the needs of the large organization. So just as an example, we had some positions on our program that were coming open. We needed some help in some particular areas. And so as a sub-consultant participant, I was able to listen to those needs of the larger firm and go back to my smaller firm and say, look, they're looking for planners or schedulers or whatever the case may be, people with environmental experience, et cetera. So keeping your ears open as to the needs and what possible needs that your organization may fill. You'll see this one again in a few minutes, but your firm's reputation is everything. So the things that you bring to the table matter, and always representing your organization with a really strong integrity is absolutely critical. That's how, as a small firm, you're going to build your reputation, potentially go to a larger firm if you'd like to, or maintain that niche that you're in. I can tell you that on our program, again, we have a vast number of DBE participants. They all provide excellent services. But just to brag on Luster National for a minute, we're known for bringing really top level talent to the table. And so that's kind of the reputation that we bring. You know, we bring folks with a lot of experience and we bring folks that can really get the work done. So your reputation as a small firm, as you probably already know, is absolutely critical. Always train your teams, your folks that are embedded with the larger firms, to be looking for value add, things that they can bring to the table, ways to integrate tools and processes and procedures that the larger firms may not have thought about before, but what value add can you bring? And then I guess really the point of the whole slide is just to have your team, your individuals, really just head on a swivel, always looking for opportunities to serve the program, always looking for opportunities to bring best practices, and always looking for opportunities to really help the larger firms achieve these mega programs and mega projects. Now, how do we maintain these organizational alliances? Well, we found on this program that co-location for us, and at least in our situation, was absolutely critical. So of those firms that are on our DBE list, of the 22 DBE firms that are serving inside the PMC here in Georgia, you cannot tell whether they work for HNTB or they work for one of the DBE firms. There's no distinction. I've heard a lot of horror stories from individuals who say, well, yeah, you're the sub-consultant. Here's a turned over orange crate. Go plug your laptop in and get the work done. It's not that way on our program. It's not that way at HNTB Atlanta. They really do integrate us. We are right there making critical decisions. We're right there with everybody else. And for us, that has been a critical thing. Now, a quick note on COVID. COVID has been an interesting thing to consider over the last 18 months. We've had folks working from home, and we're just now starting to come back here in Georgia. But interestingly enough, our client is not coming back yet, and several of our GEC firms are not coming back to their offices yet. HNTB Atlanta has made that decision that we are. But that has made for a very interesting perspective. And one thing that we noted was it was kind of like having a bucket full of water, and we had been making these emotional bank account deposits, these relational deposits into the bucket of our GEC firms and our client. And really, that's what allowed us to weather the storm, because COVID really came through and poked some holes in the bottom of the bucket, and all of those deposits started draining out. And one of the things we've noted, lessons learned, is about 18 months is about as long as you can go before you really have to start making those deposits again. So co-location has been critical for us. Maintaining mutual trust is absolutely critical. I'm so blessed to be here working in a large firm in Atlanta, HNTB, where they trust me to do my job. I do a lot of high profile things with our client, and our PMC firm trusts me to do those things. So it's really nice to have that a maintained environment of trust, and that's a really important part of having those organizational alliances. And I'll bring up these next two together: the right tools and right tools and procedures. So very often, one of the challenges of being a really big firm is that you have tools and procedures and processes that are in place that might be getting in the way of yourselves. And so I think a perspective for the small firm is to come in and maybe challenge respectfully a little bit of the right tools and procedures, and make sure that they're in place, and potentially what tools or procedures might the small firm bring to the table that the large firm may not consider. So it's a real value add when you can take a step back and say, maybe there's a better tool for the job. And then last but not least on this slide, partnering and chartering is a huge aspect for our program. So anytime we onboard a GEC, anytime we onboard a developer team or a post-let construction team, we go through the process of partnering and chartering, and that's something that we take very serious. Typically, these sessions are facilitated usually about a day in length, sometimes longer, and we'll actually sit down with all the critical participants and map out their compass heading, and that's part of the exercise that we do. We call it a compass heading exercise, where we determine the bearing, the direction for the team, where they want to go, how they want to get there, how they want to communicate with each other along the process. And we really invest some time in that. And sometimes I've had some crunchy post-let folks kind of fold their arms and say, I don't want to do the mission vision stuff. I want to get out there and build stuff. But one of those lessons learned that we've seen, at least in a few years on our program, is that if you take time to establish the partnering and chartering up front, you'll actually save money in the back end on claims. And so this is a critical part of our industry. And we've got to treat it, it can't be a one and done kind of thing. It has to be something that we operationalize, that we continue working at. And I had a construction guy in the field the other day say, you know, if we start writing letters back and forth to each other, then we've kind of failed in the partnering and chartering. And I said, yeah, hopefully you can actually talk to each other like human beings before you get to the letter writing phase, and we start talking about claims and things like that. So partnering and chartering is a critical part of what we do. Okay, just a couple of more slides here for you. I did want to talk a little bit about, these are some things that I have talked a little bit about some things you can do to develop organizational alliances. Now I wanted to shift gears again and talk about some things that you can do to develop personal alliances with the organization. I told you I was going to bring this word back up again, but there it is. Your reputation is everything. So coming to the office every day, coming to the project every day, and doing your absolute best. It's just developing that on the job reputation. That's what you're there to do. That's going to help build the reputation of your firm. If I were a CEO of a small firm or putting teams in place to go into these bigger firms, I'd want to make sure that I had a little bit of time spent on talking about how your reputation impacts the entire entity. So reputation is critical for maintaining a personal alliance. Letting people know that you're the go-to person that they can go to and get things done, it goes a long way. Developing symbiotic relationships. A symbiotic relationship is one where both teams mutually benefit. And so that's a great way to think about a small firm working within the entity of a bigger firm. Looking for things that you can do to benefit each party. Of course, most small firms are always looking for more work. They want more contracts, more jobs to work on. And so developing those personal reputation and firm reputation goes a long way to bringing up future work. So I guess it's just kind of an understood, but I thought I might bring it up because, sometimes we can get lost in the drudgery of the day-to-day and maybe lose a little bit of that. A big one for me is leading with humility. So yeah, I've been telling you throughout for the last 30 minutes or so to really come and stand out, bring your A game, deliver for the big firms so that they can achieve these complex projects. Be the small firm that raises your hand and has a voice, build those relationships, but do so with humility and do so humbly. We have a saying on our program here in Georgia where we say we like to extend a lot of grace to our team members. And what we mean by that is there's going to be mistakes made. I can promise you on your program, there will be mistakes made. There's going to be mistakes made by big firms, and there's going to be mistakes made by small firms. But ultimately, at the end of the day, extend some grace to each other and some humility. There's a, I don't know if, do y'all have Wegmans out in California? Wegmans is a grocery chain. They've got a great quote somewhere in their manuals, I'm sure it's written down somewhere, but they say, we have a high tolerance for mistakes, a high tolerance for non-repetitive mistakes made in the pursuit of excellence. And I really like that quote. I'm like, oh, that's a cool culture to be in. And that's a great definition of extending grace. As long as it's non-repetitive and as long as it's in the pursuit of excellence, maybe that mistake can have some humility and some grace associated with it. And then maintaining a high degree of emotional intelligence. I do have one more slide I'll share with you where we'll talk just a bit more about that, but that's been critical for our program. Having self-awareness from our team participants and organizational awareness is absolutely critical. And then managing the relationships, everything that's associated with emotional intelligence is absolutely critical. Here's another great article. This one is from FMI. Sabine Hoover is the author of this article. And she has a great quote in there where she says, one of the great concepts that keeps bubbling to the surface is that of trust. It is the basic emotional state that can make or break entire project teams and associated outcomes. So if that's not a plug for developing emotional intelligence and soft skills, I don't quite know what is. What a great quote. So how did we do that on this program? Well, we spent a lot of time with emotional intelligence training. I've taught a lot of workshops on emotional intelligence here with our program over the last couple of years. We teach that here in the PMC. We teach that to all of our GECs. We also teach those skills to our developer teams. And believe it or not, we've actually gone into our client and taught these skills there so that we're all using the same language, we're all in the same compass heading, and we're all going in the same direction. So we spent a lot of time on emotional intelligence training. And then also spending a lot of times with a soft skill focus. So remember, it's not all about the hard things. The hard things are kind of easy. The soft things are what's really difficult. So raising our awareness about those soft skills is important. And then another tip for you, and again, we can make these available if anybody's interested, but using some of these documents, some of these white papers as foundational documents has been really important for us. Again, it's not just then Jeff Conrad standing up there and saying, hey, this right brain thinking is important. It's me, it's NASA, it's the article from FMI, it's Harvard Business Review. Some pretty heavy hitters in our industry and in industry in general are saying these are some things that we really need to focus on, the relationships and building these small firms and building these individuals. And then my last point for you, again, we talked a bit about the bucket earlier, but just recognizing that we all, the concept of an emotional bank account is something that came out of some Stephen Covey work several years back. But that notion of making deposits into other people and not always making withdrawals from them is pretty important. And I think It's a really exciting program that you have here with the Mentor Protege workshops, where that's an opportunity for people to make deposits into the small firms, share some experience and some lessons learned that they have, and help to grow the entire community throughout the industry. And I think that programs like this are fantastic for that. But please don't forget to do that on an individual level as well in the workplace. So make sure that we're taking care of each other, make sure that we're valuing each other's emotional bank accounts, not just making withdrawals, but also making deposits for your organization and for individuals. I've talked at you for, I think I'm right on time, Raul, believe it or not, but I've talked at you for seems like about 38 minutes here, and I didn't see any questions in the chat. Raul, did we have any in the question and answer box?
No formal questions in the Q&A area yet.
Okay.
Sometimes it takes a bit to warm up, but
yeah, sure.
I'm always prime. I'm always ready to prime the pump, Jeff, with my own.
Cool.
It's a very interesting topic, and appreciate it a lot. One of the things that came up when you were talking is, I don't know if you know this or how it came about, but can you describe how Luster ended up as part of this mega project? What was that? Was there any strategic alliances? How did you end up where you are on this program?
Yeah, so early on, I think Luster was probably doing, about what most smaller firms are doing, is looking to be on some of these big programs. When the MMIP launched, it was an opportunity to bring in a lot of DBE firms and bring in a lot of small firm work. I think our involvement actually pre-Jeff Conrad started with a lot of work in our quality space. Luster had, and again, going back to that concept of bringing the best to the table and really bringing a reputation, Luster has several quality specialists who are just really some of the best, I mean, frankly, some of the best in the country. And so it was an opportunity for them to come in and do a lot of work developing. I think that our program is similar to yours in that back in those days, as we were ramping up, as we were starting up, we were developing things like a strategic program plan, and we were doing a lot of writing in terms of like how the organization is going to be run and so on. And so Luster had a great opportunity to get in and help to formulate and write some of those documents specifically in the quality arena, but others as well. And then again, everything I've been talking about, I think as that relationship was formed with HNTB Atlanta, they saw that Luster was bringing some real high quality folks. And as positions started coming available, they started to recognize that Luster could provide some really high quality components to the team. In terms of how I got here, we had I don't even remember his title. He's retired and since gone on to, I think he rides his motorcycle around the country now, which would be great. But at the time, he was a real thought leader in the HNTB organization. And he had just really pushed all along that a program of this magnitude needed to have a bit of a human side focus, a bit of an emotional intelligence focus, and a soft skill focus. And I was at GDOT and was ready to try something different and wanted to come over to the dark side and work in the consulting world a little bit. And so for me, it was just a great opportunity to come over and work on a one-of-a-kind program, much like your program out in California. I mean, this is really once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to work on some of these programs. So we're seeing that across the country. And so that's how I pulled into this seat in particular.
Awesome. So it looks like Gia's asking a couple of questions. What are the tasks for our small firms as chaos pilots? And I guess follow-up, data collection and transportation video monitoring are part of the chaos pilots work for pre, during, or after projects? Question mark.
Yep, no, those are great. So I think some of the tasks that a small firm can bring to the table in terms of being a chaos pilot is we're a bit more nimble, Gia. We're a little bit more flexible in terms of how we work sometimes as subconsultants. So what that allows us to do, now I'll put a caveat out there, if you build the relationships and if you take time to really foster the trust and the reputation development, I think sometimes as a smaller firm, we have an opportunity to kind of sit back and go, hey, wait a second, there might be a better way of doing this, or at least there might be a different way. Now that's hard. Again, it's the soft stuff that's difficult, because I've seen it on our program. I mean, sometimes it's a challenge to kind of stand up to the bigger firms and say, we can help you here if you just can bend your ear for a few minutes. So you have to go in with a lot of humility. You have to go in with a lot of emotional intelligence. But I think sometimes because we're a little bit more flexible than some of the bigger firms, we can think outside the box a little bit more effectively. And that can certainly aid in us being a chaos pilot for the bigger firm. But it requires really bringing to the table competent people that have the right competencies and the right experiences. And I know, at least here in Georgia, I don't know, I'm sure you all see this in California. I'm sure everybody sees this across the country. But one of the things that a lot of the sub firms do is they hire a lot of retirees, right? So they have an opportunity to hire a lot of people who have had a career's worth of experience. I'll just use our vernacular, like people who retire from GDOT, then bring a wealth of knowledge back to the sub consultant that can help lead as a chaos pilot, certainly for the larger firms. Of course, those people go and work for the larger firms too, but let me see the second part of the question there, data collection.
Yeah, is there specific tasks that would fall under?
As my pastor would say, the answer is yes. So Gia, it's all of those components. Those are the functional hard skills that we bring to the table. I'm in an interesting role here in that I'm in a professional services role. So my job, I mean, what I literally get paid to do is to create these alignments and to really make sure that our organizations are heading in the right direction and we're maintaining our compass bearings. All of those little services, and it goes everything from trucking and all of the DBE space that's available are all the small elements that add up to getting these things done. So yes, all of those things are components of being a chaos pilot for the larger firms and the programs as a whole. Great question, thank you.
I'll jump in again, Jeff. Focus a little bit on the emotional intelligence training that you referenced, without getting into a lot of detail. What does that entail? What does that look like? What are the topics that you focus on when you do that?
Oh man, well, I could probably do another hour. I could do a day on emotional intelligence. So I'll try to keep it short. So a great book out there for anybody who would want a book reference is Daniel Goleman's Primal Leadership. Daniel Goleman's kind of the guy that really brought emotional intelligence to the forefront. And then there are a lot of people, myself included, some other folks in our industry that are really trying to push this right brain thinking into a left brain industry. So it's making engineers think a little bit about feelings and emotions and things like that. And so I do several workshops on emotional intelligence that I facilitate. And basically what it represents is it starts with self-awareness. So knowing your own weaknesses and strengths and areas that you can improve upon, and then managing yourself. And then it's all about the relationships and managing the relationships around you. So you can take that in a personal context. You can take that in a building an allegiance or alliance within an organization. But ultimately, the thing I love about Goleman's work, it's so cool when you really get into it, is the way the foundations of emotional intelligence are set up. So it's self-awareness, self-management, relationship awareness, and basically relationship management. Each one of those can be worked on. And that's the coolest part of emotional intelligence, because it's not just saying, here's an assessment, you are what you are. It's rather saying, here's some things to think about and maybe some areas or some things that you can do to improve. And those are skills that can be worked on, and that's critical. So if you score low in self-awareness, that's fine. There are things that you can do to practice self-awareness and to increase that. And I think that goes for organizations as well, Raul. So I kind of take it to another level and I say your organization has to have emotional intelligence as well, right? So the big firms have to be self-aware. They have to know where they may not be as strong and where they may need some help. And so ties right back into this whole conversation. Yeah, that's a loaded question there, Raul. I could.
So I wanted I wanted to add to that because you're also looking for talent. And when you're doing that, how do you assess emotional intelligence before you hire somebody? I know we talked earlier about, engineers are not prone to this kind of revealing of themselves. That's a big stereotype. So forgive me for any of you who are engineers out there, including Raul. But yeah, what do you look for when you're hiring someone? So you don't have to do all that training trying to shift someone from one way of being in the world to another.
Yeah, that's a great question, Carol. I mean, essentially, and I don't, again, I could do another one on left brain, right brain thinking, but the notion is that you bring personality traits to the table, right? We've probably all done the assessments where you get your letters assigned to you, or you get put in your particular box, or they tell you what color you are, or they tell you what animal you are. Those are all great. We use some of those on our program. I love them. But ultimately, people who tend to go into left brain industries like engineering, science and mathematics and things like that, they don't tend to think about some things like emotions and feelings. And of course, these are, as Carol stated, very much stereotypes. We have some engineers on our program that are laden with emotional intelligence. So it's not to say that you can't develop it or you don't have it. But it's just saying that generally people, for example, who really, really like art tend not to be your mathematicians. Of course, there is this weird crossover once you get over into the Einsteins of the world. Then their mathematics kind of become art in an interesting way. But back to Carol's question. Again, you guys will get me excited about a topic and I'll ramble on. Back to Carol's question. Carol, I think it's one of the things that we're seeing in America right now is that our engineering schools are getting better and better about teaching management and leadership skills. Even as early as about a dozen or so years ago, many of our engineering schools did not teach any sort of management skills. They did not teach any sort of leadership skills. And I would go around GDOT at the time and I would ask young engineers, how long did you stay doing the engineering hard skill work? And they would usually say 3 to 5 years. And I'd say, well, what did you do after that? And they said, I managed a team of engineers. And what did you do after that? I managed a program, which was multiple teams of engineers. And what do you do after that? Well, now I'm running an organization and I'm no longer doing the hard skill engineering at all. So one thing, Carol, I think is that our schools are getting better at teaching some of these skills. So I really do believe that the next generations of engineers are a little bit better able to handle some of these soft skills as I've described. But hiring people is the most important thing you will do as a manager, hands down, ever. So I think when you interview people, making sure that you're asking the right kinds of questions, behavioral based questions. They're asking about times that the individual discovered something about themselves that led to some growth or some exploration. Those kinds of questions will really begin to open up that notion of an emotional intelligence. Were they aware enough to say, oh, I didn't know enough about a certain thing, so I went out and learned more about it, or I went out and learned more about myself. Those kinds of behavioral oriented interview questions are critical for finding these soft skills attributes that I've described.
Excellent. We're gonna wrap up, but before we do so, I ask everybody to stay on a little bit. I want to turn it over to Carol to go over upcoming events, including what we're going to present next month. And then we'll also do a quick poll to poll the audience here about future topics, and then we'll close out. So, Carol?
So did you want the poll first or the announcements first?
Why don't you do the announcements first?
Okay, great. So everybody can see this slide, and I'm putting information into the chat so that you can get information about how to register directly from there. But obviously, if you have not registered with VTA, or you need to get a certification as a DBE or an SBE or an MBWE, whatever, that you can go to that link there and you can get information on how to get certified. If you are not in the South Bay, you can get certified from a number of other locations throughout the state. It's always free. Do not let anybody charge you for that. Once you get all your documents together, they say, you know, kind of give yourself 90 days. So if you're looking to be on federal projects that have DBE goals, I would encourage you to do that. That also kind of covers the SBE part of it as well. So that's a little advertisement for that. Our next Mentor Protege workshop on October 14th. The topic is going to be about federal funding. And I was asking Raul, I go, really, we're going to talk about federal funding? And he said, well, and it says how to follow the Monday. Actually, it means how to follow the money. Federal funding, when large companies are looking at what's coming down the pike, they're figuring out where is money going to be spent. And that's how you begin to develop those long-term relationships and in order to get on a team for future funding. So make sure that you sign up for that one. Our next Diversity Business Forum, Bay Area Diversity Business Forum, is on Tuesday. It is such an important forum. We have people available to help you find money. So California has just increased $1.5 billion additional dollars in grants to small businesses. They opened it up last week, I believe. The opening is to the end of September, but that money is sitting there. And if you're a small business and you want to apply for a grant, we will have people there to help you walk through that. The other thing that we have also is, and the link to register is in the chat. The other thing is that the SBA, that's the Small Business Administration, has increased caps for loans. These are low interest loans for small businesses to $2 million. So those are two things that are going to be there. If you're interested in having a startup or a restart, we can, there's some legal support to help you understand kind of what are the things you need to look at. We also have someone there that's going to help you with getting ready to get a loan. You know, what do you have to prepare for? What do you need to do? So this is really a hands-on workshop. We will also have some key leaders in the state and from the Congress. Dave Cortese, Senator from California, Ro Khanna, representative from our district, District 17, and Tara Lynn Gray, who's the director of the Office of Small Business Advocacy in California. They will be part of a panel about, you know, what is coming down the line for addressing needs of small businesses. So there's a lot in the program. Please register. I'm hoping that you will take the time because we don't want to leave that money on the table. The other event coming up right away is this 10-week program management course. We had 20 slots. They were available. We filled them all up. It's a diverse group of people. We have women and disabled veterans and Black-owned companies and Hispanic-owned companies and LGBT companies. So it's a wide range of people that Silicon Valley Transit consultants helped fund those 20 slots. But the course is open to anybody who would like to sign up, and it's $345 for the course. We will be doing this again, so if you're interested, you let me know more about that. Send me an email. And I'm trying to think if there's, October, our next Diversity Business Forum is going to be a presentation from Excel Construction, who's doing the behavioral health service project for Santa Clara County and many other projects throughout the Bay Area and beyond. They are going to be presenting, and also County of Santa Clara. They have billions of dollars worth of contracts. They are going to be telling you how to get involved, get on, and to have a good look ahead. So this kind of information is absolutely essential. Every month, On the second Tuesday of the month, we will be doing a diversity business forum. I think this month, as I said, October, Excel and County of Santa Clara. The month after that is Bechtel. The month after that is Turner. And in January, we're hoping to go live and in person for a breakfast. So watch our website. I'll put the information in there so you can follow that. And I think I've come to the end of my announcement, so I'm going to do this poll.
Thank you, Carol. Move on to the poll, please. If you could
Yeah.
all respond to the poll very quickly, that'd be great. And then we'll wrap it up. Again,
So
these are
this is about your interest. Choose as many as you want. These are some future workshop brainstorming ideas that Raul and I have. One is climate, resilience, and sustainability. There's a big impact on the industry, and it's good to prepare and get ready for that. Raul, you might want to say that more about that kind of topic, because you have a whole team of people in with.
Yeah, I would just say in the interest of time, Carol, these are the general topics. These are all things that we're dealing with on a regular basis that we think are important, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's important to you all. So please voice your opinion, and we'll vet future topics based on that opinion. I want to, while we're looking at that, I want to take a second just to thank Jeff Conrad for his workshop today and his involvement. Really appreciate it. And maybe we can get you back for another topic on the emotional intelligence or something like that, because it seems really, really very interesting.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Thanks to you, Jeff.
Sure.
Reminder to everybody else that these sessions are recorded, and this one was recorded, and it'll be available for future viewing on the VTA's website and NBC's website. And then Carol, myself, VTA are always available for to field questions or future topics. But this future workshop poll is gonna help us very much. So how's it looking, Carol? We getting responses?
Yeah, we've how to manage growth from small to large is probably the biggest, and second is partnering on large programs, benefits and best practices, but everybody's interested in just about all of them.
Awesome.
Yeah, and some just said, I'm not going to choose, I'm going to choose all of them. And
That's perfect.
if you have anything that you would like to see us look at in the future, definitely give us ideas. So you can put those in the chat too. And someone is asking for contact information. Were you talking about Jeff's contact? You want the rest of ours? How do you, what, I'm not
Why don't
sure.
you put our information in the chat for everybody, Carol, and they can take it from there. I do want to respect everybody's time. It's 1 o'clock. So for those who can stay on and get the chat information, great. If not, we appreciate your participation and look forward to hearing from you in the future. Thank you. Okay, so is the chat available to all, Carol?
Yes, you have to send it to everyone.
Should I just type in my own then?
Put your own in, and I'll oops, I think consortium is spelled correctly. Yes.
Yeah, it doesn't allow you to do
I know you can't enter. You just have to do it.
typing. Yeah.
Yes. So we're so happy that you all joined us, and I'm going to stop the recording now, but we'll get the presentation out to everybody, and we should have a YouTube channel set up soon for all of the workshops as well as the forums that are coming up. So look forward to seeing you, and I hope you make it to our Economic Resource Summit on Tuesday. 9 to 12. You can, when you register, I can send you kind of information about the program itself. Okay.